Hello and welcome to the Good Leader Podcast. I'm Will van der Hart, and this series of sessions we're describing as the Stress Trap series. We're trying to help you to manage areas of life and ministry more effectively to save you stress in the long term. And I'm delighted today that we've got Penny Miller here, who is the Director of Operations at St John's Hampton Wick and has been for 14 years, and also advises the Revitalisation Trust on all of the issues around operational management. Penny, welcome to you.
Thank you very much.
And Penny, you were Operations Director at St John's Hampton Wick, and you did that from inception, so the moment the plant started to now, so that's 14 years.
Yes.
And also you're now advisor to the Revitalisation Trust in terms of operations management, is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
A lot of people will be interested in this topic and be thinking, I know I need to know, but won't necessarily have engaged with the idea of operations management, particularly before. And I'd love to start off with, just tell us, what's it mean? What is operations management?
Well, it's making sure that the church, obviously as a vicar, you are spiritually in charge of the congregation and making sure that their spiritual health is growing and good. But the operations is sort of the running of the church. It's the health and safety. It's making sure that the staff are being looked after. It's the collecting data. It's arguably the non-spiritual bit, but as an operations manager, I would say absolutely it is a ministry in its own.
It's all spiritual.
Yes, it's all spiritual.
Absolutely. Now, in my experience of both leading a church for 20 years and also being invested in the lives of other leaders, I've often seen things go wrong on an operational level, which have had a massive negative impact on the church at large.
Yeah.
And clearly that's something that you've also encountered.
Yes, I think probably the big one is finance.
Right.
If finance isn't something that you're naturally kind of au fait with, you're suddenly running really like a big business, and you've got quite a lot of money coming in, hopefully, and you've got to kind of manage that well. And you'll always have, hopefully, a treasurer, and you might have a bookkeeper, and you'll have the sort of the nuts and bolts being done. But as a vicar, I think it is really important that you're also keeping, I would say, a monthly check on just that P&L, that profit and loss report, which sounds terribly sort of accountancy, but actually it basically is a report on what's coming in and what's going out, and what does that look like? Are we breaking even every month? Are we making a profit every month? And in which case, where can we invest that?
Yeah.
And actually, but where things go wrong is when actually there's not enough money coming in for what we're doing, and it is quite easy to sort of have a little bit of a head in the sand approach and a bit of a panic time. And there's just no need for that, because you've got a PCC, you've got a treasurer, you've got people around you who can help, but you need to be able to kind of say, we've got a problem, we've not got enough money coming in, and that's where I've seen things go a little bit wrong, when the sort of vicar isn't quite on top of what's coming in and going out.
Well, I've definitely been a vicar who's not been on top of what's going in and coming out, and just leaning on really good people around me. And
Yeah.
I guess, so if we think about finance as a starting point with operational management,
Yeah.
everything you've just described makes me think that links then to planning and strategy and vision and realisation of that vision, and then staff. So
Yeah.
it's a big octopus, if you like, with many different legs.
Yes. I think the planning is really key, particularly early on. It's very easy to, particularly when you're starting out, to sort of be quite organic in how you approach things. We might run out for this term, but actually I would say always planning is actually relieves stress. It doesn't create stress. It can feel like it's going to create stress, but for even half a day of just set aside planning for the year ahead, will actually mean you can sleep at night. Because actually, if you've got down, you know how many alpha courses you're planning on running, you know Christmas and Easter, where they're plotted, what things do you want, where do you feel God's calling you to, what do you feel God is calling you to do? If that's all down on a sort of a plan, you can then do your financial budget around that plan. And all of that just is all done in one moment in time, if you like, which enables you then for the rest of the year really to be just going for it.
Doing the
ministry.
I mean, when you say sleeping well at night, that sounds great to me.
Yes.
But I think a lot of leaders watching this will be thinking, oh, is it too late? I haven't started well.
Never too late.
Okay.
Never too late. I would just always say, just get a handle quickly on a plan, a year plan.
Okay.
That's so key. And you yourself, you may think, actually, I don't even know where to start with that. Gantt charts, what are they? I just don't really understand any of this. But your congregation, there will definitely be someone in there who would absolutely love to come and help. And if you've got an ops manager, even better, they would love to be part of that.
So imagine there's a church leader, a planter or charity leader watching this. They're thinking, oh goodness, I'm very good at vision. Yes. I'm great at communicating and teaching. I've not really got invested in any of this stuff before. I guess there's two options. One is to get some volunteers invested with them to help if finances didn't allow. But the kind of the gold standard is actually to find someone, isn't it?
It is, and ideally you would have an ops manager. And I would say they don't, particularly in the early days, you don't need someone full time.
Right.
When I first started at St John's, I was 3 days a week.
Right.
And I don't even think they were full days, as I recall. And you just build, and you start with what you can and build. But I would always say, if you can have someone in that ops role, it's really going to help you, and just really kind of work together in partnership.
So we've talked about the financial bit a little bit. We'll talk a bit more about that again, and then there's the kind of the planning, which again links so strongly to the finance. Can I afford to do what I want to do? And then there's also a relationship issue, isn't there, between the leader or the vicar and then the ops manager? Because one thing I've noticed is either there's over involvement where the leader thinks they can do it all themselves, very often they can't. Or there's an abdication of responsibility where the leader sort of goes, oh, well, you're doing it, as if it's, you're doing all that mundane stuff and I do all the fun stuff over here. Neither of those models work well, do they?
No, they don't. And I think when you're recruiting an ops manager, you definitely, there's that chemistry piece. You do need to get on with them, because it is a very close relationship. A well-run charity or church, there is a good relationship between the sort of the CEO, the COO, or the vicar and the ops manager. And I think so that's very key. But at the same time, don't be picking someone who is like you, because you need the strategic mind. You need the kind of that slight organised mind that perhaps you don't have. So don't be trying to find another you. You need the rub in a sense.
Goodness, we should have met a long time ago. Penny, honestly, I think I've fallen into many of these mistakes. I looking at it now from personality diagnostics perspective, I often think, I always said 3 sorts of people: vision-driven people, people-driven people, and process-driven people. Yeah. And very often I think here we've got that. Very often there's a classic visional leader, and what he really requires is a process-driven leader to work alongside her or him in order that they can find that great matrix of vision where I want to go and how I'm going to get there. But also they tend to fall out more than any other relationship.
Well, and actually I would say there that you've met that what I would say that people piece, that's what unites us. Yeah. So the people piece is where the operations manager recognises they're in the people business as much as anyone else is. So if I'm putting a health and safety policy together, it's because I love people and I don't want them tripping over a step in the church building or whatever. And for the vicar, again, you're in the people business as well. You're wanting to see people find Jesus. And so actually that's what connects us, is that people. So I think that's what you're actually looking for. That's the sweet spot, that you've got the visionary people person and the process people person coming together.
Really helpful. Now, we're going to get into the weeds for a few classic things that I asked you before we started talking, a few things you see that cause lots of pain and haven't been thought through, and sort of, things that take up a lot of your time. We've described this little podcast under the Good Leader podcast as a stress trap series, because some of the traps we fall into create huge amounts of stress, almost disproportionate to their kind of their apparent purpose, and yet we still keep on doing them. And one of them was around the whole org chart. Now we're going to be doing a couple of sessions around HR later on in the series, but the org chart, that's a classic area for an operations manager to invest.
It is, and an org chart basically helps the whole team, and you can include your volunteers on this on this org chart as well. It just gives a snapshot of who we are as the team that is sort of running the church, and it just enables things like line management doesn't go awry. People know what everyone's doing, so there's not anyone thinking, oh, well, so-and-so, and the whole dreaded mission creep. You can avoid that if you've got on the org chart who's doing what. Everyone just knows what they're doing. I think it really, and it's about positioning people well,
right.
So that everyone has the authority for what they're doing, from the sort of the vicar or the leader. So I'm a big fan of org charts. In fact, I've just recently updated ours at St John's just to reflect some recent changes.
So this would be...
So it's an organic document.
An organic document, but everyone knows what they're being asked to do and how they're doing it in relationship with other people on the team. That sounds like a recipe for a very happy family.
And it is. It really is. It makes all the difference, I would say.
And give me an example, for example, where ambiguity in that org chart can create problems.
So the one area where I've really noticed ambiguity can cause problems is when the leader of the church or the charity or whatever has a spouse, and the spouse is wanting to be really involved in the staff team. And I think that's brilliant. I think that's a really good thing. But I think they need, as much as anybody else does, to be on the org chart with their list of responsibilities, with who they're line managing. Because what can happen is the staff come in, they think they're working for person A, and suddenly person B's around a lot and giving them tasks, and so that can be an area where I've sort of found there's been heartache.
I can imagine, yeah, and so often that happens in church context.
Not at St John's.
That the leader, their husband comes in and says, "Oh, I'm very good at this, and I'm going to do this," or a leader's wife comes in and says, "I'm really good at that," and then they assume ownership of a space when actually there might be an employed person in that position.
Exactly, and it's not that we're trying to avoid using, but actually because it's a great resource to have an additional person on the team, but just positioning
creating clarity and accountability. Now, one of the other things I wanted to ask you about was my classic fail, if you like, which was never being very good at saying no.
Yes.
And I have 10 ideas before breakfast.
Yeah,
and so the challenge for me is I was trying to lead something and then suddenly thinking, well, maybe I should do this, or maybe God's saying I should do this.
Yes.
And then sort of imagining this and getting very excited about a whole new area of ministry or a whole great new sort of project or some building scheme or something like that. And then coming along something, right, everyone, now we're going to do X. And almost people's faces falling going, oh my goodness, I can't even cope with what we're doing now, let alone now doing X. Is that something that you often see? Yeah,
I do see that. I think the key there again is going back to the planning. And I'm not saying that new ideas coming in are a problem, because they're not, and it's really exciting. But I think ultimately what we want to avoid is burnout, either of the leader or the staff team. Yeah. And also sort of just people feeling overworked and then the whole stress situation, then you've got difficult relationships suddenly coming out of all of that. So I think it goes back to the planning. So I would always say at St John's we have our planning document that again is an organic document, things come and go. And our vicar can come and suddenly say, I want to do X, Y and Z. But what we would at that point do is look at the document and say, A, does it fit with our vision? That's a very key question. Yeah. You know, you need to be very clear on what your vision is as a church, and does this new idea fit in that area? And then B, do we actually have the resource to do that right now? And the answer may be not right now, but in 6 months we do. And so let's get that in and be planning and working towards that. Great idea, but not now. Right. And
I guess another part of it might be saying, we can't add another thing in unless we take something out.
Yeah, absolutely. And then that requires a lot of prayer and and browbeating.
I mean, clergy hate closing stuff down.
They do.
You've got a group of people doing something and they suddenly like, oh, now we're not doing that anymore. Yeah. So that's really, really helpful. But I mean, there are a couple of classics there that I think will really help our people to think about moving forward. Benny, I really appreciate your time and expertise, and I know you're linked into the network, so people can ask you specific questions.
They can, yes.
Yeah, which is a great resource. And also, you mentioned that the toolkit has a really great document associated with operation management.
Yes, well, the toolkit is full of operational stuff, so I'm not suggesting you go and read it word for word. But if there's something that you think, oh, I'm just not sure about how to do X, Y, or Z, it will be on there. And if it's not, let me know. Brilliant. But it's got everything on there.
Well, you've really inspired me again about the huge value and importance of operational management in church and charity. So thank you so much for today. We really hope that you've enjoyed this session on operational management through the Good Leader podcast today. And our encouragement is not to assume that this is a kind of the only thing you need to explore, the sum of this one conversation, but this is hopefully a starting point to then explore more of the intricacies and necessities of operational management, really to help you manage the stress of leadership successfully over the long haul. Hope you have a really great day, and God bless.